At the end of the Second World War, the two global superpowers of the world, the United States and the Soviet Union, scrambled to kidnap, bribe, rob and naturalize hundreds of former Nazi rocket scientists and engineers. These researchers would be taken back to the homeland and forced to work on the space program of their new respective countries, pioneering space travel and eventually putting people into space, landing men on the moon, creating space stations, and laying the groundwork for basically all of modern space travel. But it wasn't just the Reds and the Blues who stole German rocket technology. There was a third superpower in her twilight years with an interest in taking the scientific spoils of war home in a last-ditch attempt to expand her crumbling empire to the dawning frontier of space. This is the time Great Britain went to space and then immediately gave up. During the war, the Germans had invented some rather good medium-range missile technology called V2 rockets, which could be launched from northern Germany and land in London to kill people. While the Allied air powers needed to send manned aircraft to bomb German cities, all the Germans needed to do was fire off a few rockets from the relative safety of a small base in Lower Saxony. This is a very powerful weapon, and after the war it was clear by the crumbling relationship between the East and the West that somebody had to liberate this technology for use in the upcoming Cold War to get the upper hand. Most of these rocket bases were in the British sector of a divided Germany, but there was absolutely no way the Soviets or Americans would allow one tiny island complete control of all the rocket science in the world. So by the time British occupation troops made it to these rocket bases, most of the documents relating to rocket technology had already been looted by the Americans. The scientists too had already been bought out by the other powers, with top scientists like Wernher von Braun opting to surrender to the United States because he hated the French, was scared of the Russians, and didn't think the British could afford him. That's a genuine quote, by the way, he actually said that. But the British soon came to realise that even if they couldn't get the people who designed the rockets, the next best thing would be to kidnap those who operated the rockets. Ironically, those who fired the rockets at Britain were now wanted to be employed by Britain, hence the name Operation Backfire. Prisoner of war camps were furiously searched for anyone who had any knowledge of how to operate a V2 rocket. Meanwhile, 2,000 Canadian engineers had been employed to completely repair the missile silos, and soon enough German technicians had been found to fire 3 test rockets, so that British scientists could make notes and dissect how the machines worked. Clearly, this is not the most efficient way to research rockets. Great Britain naturally didn't have the same amount of money that the USA or Soviets had, especially since the UK had a lot more important things on its mind than faffing around with space toys. But what they did have an advantage in was some of the only information available on a chemical called high test peroxide, which is a very explosive chemical formula, making it very useful for developing medium-range nuclear missiles. As the Cold War got colder, Britain looked for new ways in staying relevant on the world stage. One of these things was an independent nuclear arsenal, and using the peroxide formula, they were able to develop a missile program. The resulting Blue Steel and Blue Streak missiles could travel at speeds of nearly 4,000 km per hour, and were capable of nuking the Soviets before anyone could shoot them down. They were extremely reliable, having never failed a test mission, and could even go into space, despite the fact it was never designed to do that. The use of high test peroxide was decades ahead of its time, with the Americans and Soviets not realising its potential well into the 1980s. It was at this point that the British scientists realised they'd gotten quite carried away. They'd developed such good missile technology, but it was really expensive and really impractical. The government was looking at simply buying American missiles to save on costs anyway, so what was the point of all this? Britain had just accidentally invented a rather powerful but rather useless rocket. It was time to pivot away from the military use and towards the scientific use. The scientists soon came to realise that these small and powerful rockets, if launched at the right time at the right angle with a few modifications, could theoretically get into orbit. And if they could put something into orbit, they could put a man or a crew or anything really, and finally compete with the Russians and the Americans. But of course this would be costly. The Treasury did not like rockets. They were expensive, rarely worked, and had no real benefit to the people the government were elected to serve. The government gave the space program the funds for 5 rockets and 2 satellites. It wasn't much, but the scientists were determined to make it work. The Australian rural village of Woomera was selected as the launch site because the Australians still liked us at this point. Woomera is in the middle of nowhere and close to the equator, making it easier to put things into orbit, and launching from the British Isles had the remote chance of the rocket crashing into an oil rig or France or something. The rockets would use that good old high-test peroxide. So starting in June 1969, as the Americans were preparing to put men on the moon, the British were only just getting started. It would be called the Black Arrow Program. With patchy results and very little to show for itself, in July 1971, the Ministry of Trade and Industry announced that the UK space programme was to be cancelled with immediate effect, even though there were still 2 rockets and 1 satellite left to launch. But the 4th rocket and final satellite were already en route to Australia. Surely, the scientists argued, it would be easier to let us launch the rockets rather than turning all those ships around to bring them back to the UK to be destroyed. Fine, but one more rocket launch, that's all you get. And so, on the 28th of October 1971, the engineers readied their final rocket for launch. The satellite inside was named Prospero, after the Shakespeare character, who was a wizard who was forced to give up magic forever. It launched in the early afternoon, and everything went well to begin with. The launch went fine, the second stage went fine, it got into orbit, nice, and then the third stage, yes, and then there was a thunk as Prospero became stuck in the rocket. If it didn't free itself, it would stay inside the Black Arrow and crash into the atmosphere, and there was nothing the people on the ground could do. Communications went dead. Had worked. Somehow, Prospero had made it into space and was broadcasting its sound back to Earth. A tiny piece of a dying empire, one last expansion, one last corner in which the sun must set. The reality is less dramatic. The launch didn't cause a U-turn, it didn't change the government's mind, and upon return to the home islands, most of the scientists were promptly out of a job. There was little fanfare or celebration. The public were too occupied with the more exciting Apollo missions by the United States. The very next day, all operations of the UK rocket program were shut down and never used again. Command centres and construction hubs were turned into RAF bases, while the remaining rocket was shoved in an obscure corner of the London Science Museum. But let it be remembered that for a grand total of 1 day, the United Kingdom was a spacefaring nation. It is part of an exclusive club of countries who know how to put things in orbit and keep them there, but also part of an even more exclusive club of countries that have given up the ability. Prospero is still in orbit. It stopped broadcasting a signal in 2004, and any attempts to revive it have been futile. But it's still up there, the only evidence of a once mighty empire's attempt to reach the next frontier of mankind.